Hey guys, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about harmonizing a melody. Oftentimes in composition, you'll devise a melody first and then need to find some cool chords to put underneath it. There are many ways to do this, and as long as the end result sounds good to you, that's great. But the approach we're going to talk about today is a simple way to quickly produce interesting and clever progressions. Because I find this sort of thing easiest to do with an example, let's harmonize this melody. One of the first things you have to decide is how often and where you want the chords to change. There are a lot of options for this. You can do something simple like the beginning of each bar, or on the ones and threes or every beat, or you can do more complex syncopated rhythms with chord changes on offbeats, or if you want to take a classical 4-part writing approach, they can change with every melodic attack. But for the sake of simplicity and our sanity, we're going to start with just one chord per bar. Harmonizing a melody can be difficult as there are a couple different things that you have to keep in mind at once. First of all, there's harmonic rhythm. Just because we're starting from a different point doesn't mean everything else we've learned so far doesn't apply. People listening to the final piece won't know what you started with, they'll just hear how the pieces interact. As we mentioned in the harmonic rhythm video, there's no explicit pattern you need to follow, as long as you're actively aware of the functions of the chords you're using. For this example, we're going to keep things simple and use a classic tonic-tonic subdominant-dominant progression, but really any set of choices has its merits, you just have to be aware of what you're doing. The other thing to keep in mind is that the notes of the melody need to fit over the chords. The simplest approach here is to make them chord tones, though more advanced methods exist. However, not all notes need to fit perfectly. Long-held notes should, but shorter ones can sit outside the harmonic structure if you want. This exit from expectation can create cool effects, but if you sit on them too long, you create a dissonant, uncomfortable rub between the melody and its supporting harmony. Another thing to note is that chord tones higher in the chord structure, especially the 7th degree, tend to sound richer than lower ones like the root. This isn't good or bad necessarily, but it's useful to keep in mind. So with those in place, let's take a look at our melody. The first thing to note is the key. In this case, B flat major. That way, we can think about the notes in relation to the key they're in. We could harmonize this in a different key, changing the functions of the notes, but for now, we'll stick with the obvious one. The first bar has 4 notes in it. However, those 8th notes are going to pass by so quickly that they don't wind up having much impact on the harmony. We really only need to worry about the dotted quarters. We know we want a tonic chord, and we know it needs to support an F and an A. Our basic tonic chords are B flat, D minor, G minor, and their related 7th chords. The A means we probably don't want to use the G minor here for now, although later on we'll encounter some reasons why that might not be true. Likewise, A doesn't exist in the B flat major triad. This leaves our choices as B flat major 7, D minor, and D minor 7. Personally, I like to start harmonies on the 1 chord to emphasize the tonic, so I'll choose B flat major 7, but that's not the only right answer. In the second bar, we only have 2 notes, and they're both fairly long, so our chords should include both. D and C are a whole step apart, which means that there's really only 1 chord in this key that supports both of them as chord tones. Fortunately, that chord, D minor 7, is a tonic function chord, which is what we wanted anyway. It's almost like I did that on purpose. In the next bar, again, we can ignore the 8th note A. Also, since we have 2 B flats, we can ignore one of them. Our chord has to support a G and a B flat. Here we want a subdominant function chord. In this key, those are C minor, E flat, and their 7th chords. C minor doesn't have a B flat, but the other 3 work just fine. But let's narrow this down a little more. We've just used 2 7th chords in the last 2 bars, so let's continue that theme. That means the E flat major triad is out. And if you remember from the subdominant video, we mentioned that when using 7th chords, the 2 minor 7 is usually better because it doesn't contain the 3rd degree of the scale, so my choice would be C minor 7. This also gives us a cool stepwise movement in the bass as an added bonus. Now we need a dominant function chord, and it has to support an E flat, an F, and an A. Fortunately, those are 3 of the 4 notes in F7, the primary dominant function chord in B flat. So let's use that. This can resolve back to B flat major 7, or if you want the progression to continue, we could go to G minor 7, or even something weird like E flat major 7. But let's keep it simple for now. This is what our final harmony sounds like. But like I said, you don't have to do just 1 chord per bar. Here's a harmonization of the very same melody with a chord changing every 2 beats. Really, the only limit is your ear and whether what you make sounds good to you. This is just a tool to get there as quickly as possible. So that's one method for harmonizing a melody. Try it out with this melody or one of your own, and keep on rockin'.